Welcome back. I had a lot going on this week. Replaced a wheel bearing on a car. We got our 750 Honda running and got a little bit more done with the pull tractor. We're also going to find out if we were able to get this OC3 running. Hope you enjoy this episode. Our new carburetor, all the linkages are here now for the OC3. The first thing I have to do though is take the torches and cut off this rig here. Somebody's actually used a parking brake cable to work the throttle, so we got to get it out of the way first, and then we can put this thing together the way it was meant to be. This is what they were using as a throttle. I mean, I guess for makeshift it worked okay, but I like having everything work the way it's supposed to work. With that parking brake handle out of the way, we can set to work on putting our new carburetor on. Now we can put our governor rod in. I'm just going to set it in loosely for now, because once we get everything set up and started, we're going to have to make some adjustments. In trying to hook up my throttle rod here, I discovered that something was wrong and it wasn't hooking up. I thought it might be because of the bracketry for the blade, but then it dawned on me that someone has taken and bent the governor rod, or the governor shaft rather, down, I guess, for that cable setup that was there. So I got to heat this up and bend it back up, and then our new rod should work fine. Got to sneak up on it and do a little bit at a time, otherwise it could crack. I don't want to upset the molecules too much. Alright, it might do it. Alright, as long as we're within our adjustments, we should be okay, but I may need to pull it forward a little bit more. Alright, we know we have fire and compression, and we got the fuel system all set up. Let's see if it runs. Here's our little baby bird sitting on her eggs, looking back at us. I'm about ready to tune the Honda now. We've got our mercury sticks set up. They're called that because there is mercury in them with these glass tubes, and they are tied into each one of the 4 carburetors. So when we start this up, we're going to check the difference in vacuum readings between each one of the carburetors and adjust them accordingly. So you see we're running here. I'm taking and changing the number 1 cylinder, closing it off just a little bit so you can see the vacuum go up on it. So you can see the changes that are being made by closing off the idle, causes the vacuum to go higher. Now you hear that popping that's going on. Did not replace the points, but I've got a set coming. So we'll get those replaced and I'll take care of some of that. Now we're going to try to get these things evened out at idle as best we can. Got them pretty close. We just need to be within 10%. We'll rev it one time, see where they fall back to. What you notice here is cylinder 3 is a little low. That's because that one's opened a little too far. We're going to shut it down. You see it coming up now. We've got them a little more even. We'll rev it again and make sure that they come back as close to within 10% of each other as possible. And there they are. So what I'm going to do now is take and start adjusting our pilot screws, paying attention to the engine RPM as I do it. Try to get all 4 of these synced together as closely as possible. We'll readjust the idle, and then this thing should be ready for a ride once those new points are put in. You can see this spot here in this fender is a little low. We're down to the aluminum here and there, and it's a little low spot there. It is so slight that I can barely feel it, so I don't want to put any filler there. I think with a couple of good coats of primer, and then we'll block that area one more time. I think that'll take care of it. So Alejandro's got the first fender just about completely wet sanded. We're using 400 grit. He's got the ink powder on it, so he's looking for low spots. Right now we haven't really found any. And once all the ink powder is gone, as long as we haven't gotten through to the aluminum, we'll be able to get these things ready to spray. Got these weight brackets scuffed down and ready to spray. These are going to hold some of the weights for the tractor. These have already been sandblasted and coated, so all I had to do was scuff them. We're going to put a single stage red on these, and that'll be 2 more pieces gone. And here they are, a nice pretty red. This is the Springer front end for the 36 Harley. I've got it here on a bench. I did pull the acorn nuts off of the top of it to get rid of the headlight bracket. But before I take it apart any further, I've ordered a manual for this bike. I'm going to wait for it to come in. I understand how it comes apart, but I believe down here there's a bushing or 2 that's missing. I want to make sure that I have everything before actually tearing it apart. So once that book comes in, we'll get this thing disassembled, get this fork rebuilt, get it back on the already painted frame, and then we can start putting some wheels on this thing to get it to a rolling chassis stage again. I'm ready to repair the damaged holes on the carburetor body for the Goldwing. I've got the thread insert kits and everything I need. First thing I'm going to do is drill the hole. Take some compressed air and blow the shavings away. Then we're going to tap the hole. It's really important to get these things started straight. The idea is you want to screw it in about a half a turn, back it out a quarter. That helps to clean out the shavings. It's really important that aluminum, because that aluminum can gall into the tap and it can ruin the hole. Then the thread insert won't fit in correctly. Alright, now that we're pretty much there, go ahead and back it out. Be really careful to keep it straight. Near the end, it could go crooked on you and mess up the beginning threads, and then the insert won't go in very easy. Hopefully you can see the threads we made. That's for the insert itself. We'll get those shavings blown out of the way, and we'll start putting the insert in. Got the thread insert ready to go in. I'll show it to you this way because it is kind of hard to see it. And then I'm going to take and screw this into the hole that we drilled and tapped. We're going to get it in just a little below flush. Now it's back to our original 4mm size, so we'll be able to put the bowl on, put the original screws back in, and tighten it down. This is the one that has the insert in it. We'll get all these started first, barely seated, then we'll go back to tighten them. Nice and tight, just like new. The Goldwing carburetors are finally all back together and ready to be installed on the bike. So we're going to try to do that this coming weekend and then maybe get it running for next week's episode. This car had a bad roaring noise coming from the right front. When I pulled it apart, this hub assembly came off pretty much in my hand. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be pressed apart. And the ball bearings, they just kind of fell out on their own. So I've got a new bearing coming to get this thing pressed back together, and we should be good to go on this wheel. In pressing out this old bearing, I have to have something to support the hub. And this brake rotor works really well. It's a large enough center that the bearing can be pressed through it, but it also is supporting it. So I can put that over top of the rotor like so. And I'll put in an old bearing race that I can press with against it. Put this piece on top of it. And we'll get it centered. Bring the press down. Then we can start applying some pressure and getting this thing out of here. Alright, we're at the end of that. Now, I just have to find something else to put over top of this to finish pushing it out the rest of the way. This piece here might actually do it. We'll be able to put it in through the center and it'll hit the bottom of our press. And then we should be able to push it through the rest of the way. It's getting easier, so I know I'm getting close. It should just fall right out the bottom. And there it is. Now we'll get our hub assembly all cleaned up and get ready to press the new bearing in. While we're in here, we're going to go ahead and replace the ball joint as well. I've got the ball joint press set up. Got a cup down here to accept the ball joint as it gets pressed through. I've got this rig set up so that we're going to impact this down, and it's going to press the ball joint through the control arm and into that receiver, and that should take the ball joint out. Alright, like that. Alright, so here's the old ball joint. It wasn't worn out, it still had some life left in it, but when you're going to this much work, replacing that bearing, ball joint has to come apart anyway, so good idea to replace it all at one time. We got our new bearing assembly ready to go in. Couldn't use the rotor to set this assembly on, so I had to use some blocks to get it set up level. We'll get the bearing put in place. We'll set a plate on top of it, and then we'll be able to press it in nice and square. Now once we get down to flush, I'm going to have to come up with something a little different to get this piece pressed in so it can go in all the way, and I'll show you what we're going to do when we get to that point. I think we're going in pretty square. I want to feel for resistance in the press, or in this case the jack. If it starts getting a little harder, that means we're binding on something, or maybe it's going in crooked. But as long as it feels the same and it's moving about the same amount, then we're okay. This one's going in really well. I'm getting close to flush, so again, once we get there, we'll have to stop. I can feel that in the pressure, actually. Take this off out of the way. You can see we're definitely down. Now what I can do is I can use the old bearing to press. You might have seen some of my students doing this in the past. We're going to get this set up there. It is the right diameter. And you only want to press from the outside, as we've said this before. If you press from the inside, that puts too much pressure on the bearings themselves. It overdoes the preload on the bearing, and you're going to have premature failure. The bearing's going to fail very quickly because there's no room in there for the grease to get in between the bearing and the race. So you always want to press on the outside, never in the middle. So we know this is the right size because it's the old one that came out. Then we'll be able to put that plate under it and start pressing with the old race. Alright, same amount of movement, it gets hard there. So now when we take this out, we should be completely down and have cleared the groove where the snap ring goes. Yep, we've cleared the snap ring, so we'll be able to put the snap ring in, and this bearing assembly is ready to now get the hub pressed into it. Our new bearing kits actually came with new flanges, so we're going to be pressing those in now. And what's different about this is when we pressed in the bearing, we pressed from the outside so we didn't do any damage. What we're going to do now is we're going to press the flange in, but this time we're going to support from the inner race of the bearing so that these two can go together without doing any damage again to the bearing. So we're all set up here now. We've got the support underneath for the inner race. We've got our press set level and ready to press the hub in. So let's see how it works. Just like with doing the other one, you feel the resistance. You're looking for the same amount of resistance. If it starts getting harder, then there could be a problem. It could be out of alignment or some debris or something. So always be monitoring that. There we go. So we've got our bearing in, we've got our hub in, and we're going to get ready to put it back on the car. Okay, with the new hub assembly put in, with our new bearing, and we've got our new ball joint in place, it's time to put the entire assembly back together. We'll start by setting the hub on the ball joint. Get it in place. Get our half shaft through the center. And then hook the top of the spindle to the bottom of the strut. I'm going to use the old nut just to hold this in place for now. I've got a new nut to put on it, but this is just to hold it on while I'm setting the bolts together or putting the bolts in for the strut. Get the nuts put on it, tighten it down, we'll get our new nut on and torque that down, torque the bolt across for the ball joint, get our tie rod back in place, then we'll put the brake assembly back together. Doing a tune-up on this car as well. We've got the intake plenum off in order to gain access to the 3 rear plugs. So we're going to take the coils out and get those plugs out, see what they look like, and replace those. It was a good idea to replace these plugs as the gap on these is definitely wider than they're supposed to be. And that's going to cause the coils to work harder and have to try to jump that gap and can burn the coils up and take them out prematurely. So replacing these plugs now is definitely the right thing to do. What we're also going to be doing here is replacing the boot kits. This is our coil-over plug. And you can actually get the kits for these in case they get dry rotted. They could leak water or something into them, or oil if the valve cover gasket begins to leak. But we'll pull this end, the end of this piece off, and then this piece here as well will come off. And then this is the coil assembly itself. So what we're going to do first is put the new boot, upper boot, on. It's just going to fit over the coil stem like so. Push it down and make sure it goes down all the way. Then the really important piece is this here. This is the one that will go over top of the spark plug itself, but there will be a spring in the bag if they're not already part of it. And we have to make sure that in that little hole there, the spring goes in there. If we don't, then it cannot make contact with the plug and the plug will not fire. So what that spring's going to do, we put this over top of the end of the coil, oops, wrong way, like so. Then that's going to make contact with the piece inside of the stem of the coil, and then the other end is going to make contact with the spark plug itself, and that's what's going to allow it to fire the plug. Now we'll put the spark plug back in, get the coil back over top of it, and do the rest of them to finish the tune-up on the car. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have the points put on our CB750 and take it for a ride. We'll have the carburetors put back on the Goldwing and hopefully have it fired up. And we'll start the OC3 up again and take it for a ride. See you next week.